So that was wonderful to talk to a longtime friend of Core Experience, someone who went through our workshop, someone who you've known for a very long time, and covering all these issues around occupational therapy and expanding our minds about how good it is.
I've watched her go through so much in her life, and to come out on the other side getting her PhD in OT is pretty amazing. And I have to be straight up with you. I had no idea what some of these occupational therapists are doing in the world right now.
Yeah.
And she didn't talk about it much. We'll have her talk about it when she comes back, but she's going through this brand new PhD program in Hawaii. She'll be the first graduate of this new school.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so we'll get the information on that. But man, they're doing things right.
This is good work. Everybody needs this. We all need this in our lives, and the earlier the better. I love how she talks about this beginning at age 0, basically beginning with babies.
Yeah, make the world a better place for sure.
Yes.
The world is a lot right now. Are you feeling it? We all need new tools to help us walk through the chaos with grace, ease, and compassion for each other and for ourselves. In this podcast, you'll hear from parents, educators, and other experts who can bring perspective to the monumental job of parenting. It's time to level up and be warriors for our kids and our communities. This is the Warrior Parent Podcast. I'm Marci Mitchell.
And I'm Debbie DiManno. As parents, we understand that it really does take a village to raise our kids. We hope that this podcast serves to create and support that community for you. Join us as we discuss and practice our core tools, which are proven mind-body techniques that can be used by anyone to improve your life on a daily basis.
Welcome back to the Warrior Parent Podcast. This is our second episode in the year 2025. Happy New Year, everybody. We're so glad to be here again, speaking with you, being with you, going into these topics and talking about stuff that matters. So thanks for listening. Today, we are talking with a longtime friend of Core Experience, Alyssa Curtis, who currently lives in San Diego, California, as she finishes up her doctorate in occupational therapy. She's passionate about advocating for occupational therapy in the mental health setting, and she's looking forward to sharing her perspective today, and we are looking forward to hearing it. So thanks for being with us, Alyssa.
Thank you so much for having me. I really look forward to sharing my perspective on some of these issues.
Awesome.
Oh boy. So those of you who are not watching us on YouTube, I'm like beaming proud mama right now because I have known Alyssa for more than 20 years, since she was probably 3 years old. And we have been through a lot together. She and my daughter have been best friends, lived across the street. And I've just watched this girl become this amazing human. And I have a cold and I am crying all at the same time.
Oh, that's going to go well.
I know. We might be taking a break here in a minute.
There's no crying in podcasts. Well, there is, but not when you have a cold.
Yeah, but anyway, I'm so incredibly proud of Alyssa. As we were talking earlier, Alyssa just didn't roll out of bed and decide she's gonna have this PhD. Like, Alyssa has had a lot of trials and tribulations with her own emotional and physical health. So this has not been an easy road for her. And in fact, it was Alyssa and my daughter Tori who inspired me to start doing this work. So when I saw that the problems they were having around just the friends, the mental health issues, the phones, the nonsense, the high school stuff, and then just our crazy families mixed all into that. It was a lot. It was a lot that everyone went through together. So anyway, this whole thing, Core Experience, happened partially because of you, Alyssa, and I want to thank you for that. And it was Tori's idea for us to do the podcast. So here we are.
Thank you, Tori.
some OGs doing some warrior parenting. But anyway, that being said, Alyssa's been sharing a lot of information with me as she's been going through her training, and I have watched her work so incredibly hard. But she's been sharing a lot of what she's been studying with me, and I have to say I'm sort of shocked. My husband is in the occupation work workplace. And I thought that's mostly what occupational therapists do. They go out into the workplace and they get people back to work. And I kind of thought that was it, but I have learned a whole lot more from Alyssa. So Alyssa, let's give us your perspective on how you got here, why you decided to get into occupational therapy, and what you're learning.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I have to say, I agree. Even when I started this program, I had no idea the possibilities of occupational therapy. I thought I knew this amazing profession I was getting myself into, and I just still to this day am learning like more and more things we can do. So it really is amazing, and there's always more to learn. But yeah, I always just knew that I wanted to do something that was gonna be meaningful and purposeful and working with people and lifting others up. And I looked into other healthcare professions for a while, but I didn't really want to be the bearer of the bad news. Even though we're helping people through some of these lowest times in their life, I like the idea of being able to help them through that recovery process.
Yes.
And really, the biggest thing with OT is the fact that it's so holistic. And we
We love
look at
that.
everything. We're the only healthcare professional that's looking at people in this global lens. So we're looking at like financial, physical, emotional, social, spiritual, like everything you could think of that's going to tie into how we function throughout our day. And something that kind of helps me understand occupational therapy is think of occupations as anything that occupy your time. That could be taking care of my cat. That could be if I am a painter and I want to paint. That could be going on my evening walk. And that could be what really brings purpose into my life. It doesn't have to be these, a lot of times work isn't unfortunately even where we find most of the meaning in our lives.
Yes. Yes.
So I think there's a huge misconception with that word
Yes.
occupation.
What I don't want to interrupt you, but what I found interesting is you do all this work with children, right? And you're thinking, oh, well, what is an occupational therapist doing with children? Well, it's what children do every day, which is get out of bed, eat their eat their food, try to do what little kids do all day.
Right. And
Um,
play in school. Those are like kids, the two things
yeah,
that they're worried about most of the time, is building connection with people at school, within their families, and then through play, essentially, is how they learn all of those
yes,
important skills growing up.
Yeah. I was sharing before we started the podcast that, my son, who I've shared, is on the spectrum. And the occupational therapist that did come into his life, various schools, he was in a lot of different schools because we were moving. And then when he was diagnosed, then there was more things that were brought in. And I always loved the perspective, the outlook of the occupational therapist, because they came in without judgment. They came in with like this open mind. They wanted to start talking to my son. They wanted to hear what he had to say. And then they were responding with wonder and joy and interest instead of judgment. And it wasn't this like, how we're going to make him do what we need him to do. And that was fantastic. I love that.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I think that really needs to happen more, and I think T has a really good lens on let's take these stims or these hyperfixations kids are having and let's like incorporate that into their therapy because they're using that to regulate themselves.
Right.
Instead of just trying to fit them into this mold for
Exactly.
that they're not disruptive in the classroom because that's not going to work.
That's old thinking. That's old paradigms. Yeah,
Totally.
absolutely. It's that looking at that whole child is so important.
Yeah, and strengths-based is huge in OT as well. It's client-centered, strength-based, and occupation-focused. That is kind of like three things that really, I think as a practitioner, a new practitioner too, going into field work soon, that's something that I'm going to keep at the forefront is.
Talk about that. Talk about what does that mean to be strengths, what to look at strengths-based or work from
Yeah.
that strength-based idea.
So strengths-based, it's, pretty self-explanatory, but we focus on the strengths of the child or the adult, anyone we're serving, and we use that to get them to their occupation. So it's kind of using occupation as a means and an ends to get, we're using occupation to get to occupation, and we want to use the things that they feel confident in already to help continue building that self-efficacy instead of just reminding them of these things that they can't do the same as other kids or might have a more difficult time doing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
It's
Yeah.
powerful. It's
Yeah,
so
like
powerful.
it's so basic. It is so
Yeah.
basic. Like, hello, like, Alyssa knows me as a basketball coach or whatever. Like, you don't like take 5 people on a basketball court and make the smallest person the center or whatever. Like, right? You're always looking for the strength of the human, right? Like
Right.
Marci and I, like, there's certain things that she does so much better than I, and maybe one or two I do better than her, but
Plenty.
but right, like, we could change the world if we just stopped and listened to
Right.
what people want to do, and they know they're born with a purpose. Just ask them. Right. And
Yeah.
as we spoke with Alyssa earlier, she brought up the word purpose probably 5 or 6 times in the couple of minutes we were having a conversation. And we talk so much about purpose here, but I can imagine how that feels to be one of your clients who is just being seen and heard for the first time, maybe.
That is huge. And
Right.
it's huge for the parents of the client too, when we're talking about kids in school, to see someone who's not trying to cram your kid into a hole they don't fit in, but instead is
Right.
seeing their
Yeah.
strengths, their wonder, the beauty of them, the wit, the humor, all the things that
Yeah. And I think, yeah, we're all just kaleidoscopes of everything we've ever experienced. And it's like we talked about earlier, lived experiences. They're so important, and we can learn so much from people by just
Yeah.
a little bit more mindful in how we move through our day and listen to people. And
So I think the idea of having occupational therapists in schools
Mhm.
is sort of a new concept. Is that not true?
It's gaining traction.
So, but
And
I mean, like, in the
gaining-
last 10, 15 years, like, this is like when I was growing up, there was no occupational therapists in the school.
you weren't in California, so
Oh,
yeah,
is that it?
I think it depends where you are.
Can I
Really?
share my screen really quick and share this with you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let
Okay,
me-
go ahead and share that. If you are just listening, if you get a chance, go to our YouTube channel so that you can look at what Alyssa is sharing, and we will, we're gonna go ahead and put it in our show notes too, so you could check it out there as well.
So here we have 1975, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. And this is kind of when we started being seen as someone who can support individuals in a school-based setting.
Mhm.
And then the idea, which we all know and are familiar with, and that's kind of when we started focusing more on behavioral needs
Mhm.
in education. And then from there, it kind of just has gained more and more traction. I think that a big thing too is just awareness and advocating and stigma and just not,
Mhm.
even as someone who was going into OT, I think just educating and advocating is huge here. And, kids
Yeah.
do have, kids can have these services and they don't need to just be,
Yes.
trying with, so yeah, we have the Every Student Succeeds Act. And this is
2015.
this is when we actually became specialized, like certified as specialized instructional support personnel within the school. So
Excellent.
us counselors, psychiatrists, there's a
Yeah.
handful more,
Is
but
it mandatory then that every school has an occupational therapist? How does that work? Who
I'm
determines?
not entirely sure about like mandates for that and stuff.
Yeah. I was just going to say, it's probably the kind of thing where, you have a federal law like the Americans with Disabilities Act or something like
Right.
that.
Right.
And so certain states are going to embrace this idea that we can support kids, like California does this and really support kids. And keep in mind, I'm speaking as a parent of a child with disabilities in the system. I'm not an expert on this, but there will be other states that are going to be more resistant to it. And when it's a federal law, sometimes people have to bring suits in order to get it mandated, to get where it actually does happen. But
Right.
especially with something so recent as 2015, that's great that that the progress is being made towards that.
So I think we're seeing a lot of ball is starting to roll on just the awareness of what we can do in schools and stuff.
Yeah.
In schools, we really focus on youth, at least. It's a lot of like, your son experienced, he had someone helping him with some autism and there's socio-emotional ADHD, developmental delays. But something that's also really important too is with OT, one thing I love is that our caregivers of our clients are always our clients as well. And we're taught that in school. And I think
That's nice.
Wow.
That is nice. As a parent, that's a nice thing to hear.
yeah,
Because I mean, it's good to feel like the people you love the people who are on your kids' team, and then to know that there's someone kind of
in your
caregiving you as well, because it can be a lot. If you're a parent out there who's gone through this, it's a lot. It can be so hard. It can be, I mean, I have literally wanted to pound my head on the table in an IEP meeting with frustration, with
just
just
powerless,
especially when you've got sometimes, and it's very different school to school, state to state. My kids went to school in 3 different states. Sometimes it's so bureaucratic, and yes, you feel powerless, and you've got these supposed experts telling you something like a thing that was said to my kid. Well, they don't fit into this. They did all the testing. They don't fit here. They don't fit here. They don't fit here. So they don't qualify for services. And versus someone in another state saying, we're not really sure what's going on, but clearly they need some help, and we're going to help them. So you can have this spectrum of service, but in the end, for me, the attitude that people approached my child with was the most important thing. And were they coming with judgment? Were they coming with, why won't he do this? Why doesn't he sit still? Why is he under a table with a marker drawing on his hands? He has to stop that. That's not okay. Why is he walking out of the classroom, which was one of his go-to moves? He's like, I can't deal with this. I can't express to you why I'm out. Versus someone who's like, wow, look how creative they are. Look at this. They're so funny. They're so, and who can sit with them and say, wow, I can see how that's frustrating to you. Let's, look more about that.
And that just shows too, like as a parent, you can feel that when someone walks in to work with your child, and and you can, that's going to help build rapport and trust and just help the outcomes of the child be so much better. So I agree. Just, having our why as we walk in, I think is so important.
I always would say there are 2 kinds of people that I see. There's people who get my kid, and there's people who don't get him. And there's a look. You talked about the look. They get like, what's wrong with you? Versus people who just immediately enchanted with, he's funny, he's witty, he's hilarious, he's unexpected. So, hey, we just wanted to take a quick moment to tell you about something very exciting that Debbie and I and our team have been working on for literally years. And that is our Cour Tools app, which is now available at the Google Play Store and at the Apple Store. And you can sign up for it now, and you will get access to all the tools we've been talking about on the podcast.
And if you're an early adopter of Cour Tools, you can get a VIP price for $49 for a lifetime. That's
lifetime.
Right.
Buy it once, and we'll keep updating it too.
Yes. So we're super excited about this. Go to Apple Store, go to Google Play, and purchase it now.
Cour Tools, COUR, capital TOOLS.
Go get it.
Yeah.
People listening to this are probably thinking, oh, you guys just talking about, a rare child here or there, right? I was
That's
looking
rare.
at some of the statistics from Alyssa's document that she sent me. It says approximately 1 in every 5 children and adolescents has a diagnosable emotional or behavioral disorder. That's 20% of the kids, right? That's got something going on, right? This is not some one-off here,
No.
one-off there.
And like, even beyond that, even a kid who maybe can thrive in a school could still benefit from somebody who sees them, who's looking at their emotional needs, who's looking at the whole kid, as Alyssa said. Like this is good for everybody.
And we have, I'm sure you guys are familiar with tier 1 through tier 3 supports in school.
Yes.
So we do that as well. So,
Let's talk about that a little bit, because there's probably a lot of parents who don't know what that is. So maybe just give a little brief.
Yeah, so there's 3 tiers of sort of mental health support within the schools. Tier 1 being kind of universal design. So this could be just an anti-bullying, like a prevention thing with flyers or an assembly. It could be general coping skills, general socio-emotional building skills. And then tier 2, it's a little bit more specified. Maybe kids who are at risk of developing some mental illness. So starting to kind of catch it as it comes. And then tier 3 are going to be the more specific, individualized programs for individual students or small groups. So
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about social emotional learning. I think there's such a misunderstanding about what SEL is. It's been all over the news for the last, 2 or 3 years. And basically, SEL has been banned in certain states of the United States. Books have been banned that just have the term SEL in them. So Alyssa, tell us about social emotional learning and like what you learned and what that means to you.
yeah, so socio-emotional, obviously social, and we have the emotional. And we know that from an occupational perspective, we are social beings. We thrive through being with one another, being in community, connecting with people, and how important it is for us to be able to regulate ourselves. And we don't
Yes.
realize how often it's happening, like throughout the day, just like you said, your son running out of the room, that was his way of regulating himself in that moment.
Mhm.
So socio-emotional learning, it's really learning about our own emotions and ourselves and
Yes.
identifying that in others
Yes.
and just how it crosses over in our social lives and how important that is in connection.
And
And
so I'm wondering what might make that illegal.
I
I mean,
know.
I'm being
I
facetious right now
know,
because it makes me mad, but
yeah,
for people who are listening to this and think, oh, that SEL like woo woo stuff. No, it's just having
it's
kids.
just science.
Yeah, it's just having kids. If we're teaching kids what to do with their emotions, I mean that's straight up.
I think of it as learning how to be a human being, like how to be a kind, understanding, functioning human with other humans. So when you're
Exactly.
learning, yeah, when you're learning how to speak to someone else kindly, when you're learning how to stand up for yourself if you've been bullied or insulted, when you're learning how to be compassionate or empathetic with someone who's suffering, when you're learning how you're feeling, like when you're learning that, oh, I feel so bad, but
And
that doesn't
connecting
mean I
that,
am bad. Like
yeah,
it's okay to feel bad. And like if you can process
Yeah.
emotions. So, and we see so many adults who cannot, you talked about emotional regulation, who cannot regulate themselves, who yell, who scream, who act, knock things over. We see these videos of people acting so badly, whether they're, I hate to use the word Karen because I know there's plenty of wonderful Karens in the world, but people with that type of behavior who are just acting so badly, they need some social emotional learning so that they
they're
can,
probably the ones who are trying to ban it too, because they
yeah,
know
Yes.
that's
that and
exactly
they don't know
it.
how.
Yeah, it's not, there's no threat. The threat is that you will get comfortable in your own shoes and in your own self, and that your kids can be comfortable. And that's not scary. That's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's scary that people see it as a threat when really it's just feeling like we understand ourselves and others and the reactions they're having and how
Yeah.
complex the world we live in is, and knowing that people have their lived experiences that they're going through, just like we have ours.
Yes.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I really don't understand why it's banned. I don't know if it's because it helps promote thinking for oneself. That's the one thing I
It's
can
a it's
maybe
a
think of.
political nonsense. It's
Yeah.
a tool to vilify certain things. I mean, there's a number of reasons, and the more people start to understand how fundamental it is to being a human being, how fundamental it is to being, starting with you being able to take a breath, to think before you respond or react, to show up in
Yeah.
the world in a way that feels in your values. We talk about that all the time, and then also to bring your children up that way,
Yeah.
so that they are these emotionally regulated.
Yeah.
Emotionally regulated just means that you're not out there going crazy, that your emotions are not running the show for you. You still get to have emotions. You can be angry, but do you want to act out when you're angry in a way that is not in your principle? Maybe you want to stand up and say, this is not okay. And that is in your principle, and that's okay. You're regulated then. But if you're just screaming and yelling and breaking things, and then later you're like, oh shit, I
Right.
really
Kids
screwed up.
need to learn
That's
that.
not right.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's something that is learned. Like kids, one way that kind of is easier to explain it, but when we're upset and we're angry and we are living in our emotions, we're back in our brainstem, and
Yep.
we need to get back to our frontal lobes, and kids
Yes.
don't have the ability to do that. They can't
Right.
do that for themselves. They need to be taught how to do it. And that's what the
Exactly.
socio-emotional learning does. It helps them just bring themselves out of those emotions into their thoughts and be in the moment and be present and not have a tantrum or et cetera, et cetera. So
I'm not a good snapper, but that's like yes to that. What you're saying there, you can't hear it. I'm trying to do it. Let me do it in the mic. It's like,
No,
bam, that is, you just said it, what you said.
yeah.
yeah, as kids, they're not gonna, nothing's registering. They're in their
No.
emotions. When you're yelling at them, that's just keeping them there.
Yeah.
Yes.
We need to give them the
Yes.
tools that they need to get back into their space and be able to actually actively create the outcome that they want.
So, Alyssa is starting her clinicals this next week. I'm super excited for her, and she's going to be working with some young kids. So, Alyssa, like, tell us about like what a day might be like for you. Like, what are you going out to do? Tell us how you might help in the schools. Tell us some things that that might be applicable for parents to learn.
Yeah, totally. So, I will be working with 0 to 3-year-olds in early intervention. And one thing that with OT we really focus on when we work with such young kids is making sure we come to their environments. And then also another important thing is not to bring in toys or materials that give the indication that they're these magic toys that are going to somehow fix the child, you know?
Oh,
So
interesting.
using what they have, and that's another strength-based approach, is using what they already have.
So are you going into homes?
Yeah, homes and preschools as well. So,
Okay.
for example, let me say this and then I'll go through kind of the first, like what a day might look like.
Okay.
But at my last lab in Hawaii, we were able to go to a preschool and I had the 18-month-old group. So I was doing a socio-emotional learning group, therapy group for these 18-month-olds. As you can imagine, it's a little difficult. They're so little.
Yeah. Wow.
So
Wow.
much going on up there, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So I did some emotion identification with the inside out characters. And honestly, it wasn't even like not all of them, it wasn't registering with all of them because some of them were dealing with their own developmental delays and such. But
hmm
just kind of starting to identify those emotions and how you feel when
Mhm.
you're happy. What does that look like? When you're sad, what does that look like? And then once they get older, teaching them those coping mechanisms. So emotion identification was one thing we did with the really little ones. And then I read them a book that also had a lot of emotions in it.
hmm
So that's kind of like what it looks like with the little kids. But so I'm not going to be doing necessarily mental health for these kiddos. The thing is with OT is they say every setting you're in, it's going to have a mental health aspect to it. These people
Yes.
are in some of the worst times of their life, sometimes after injuries, illnesses, diagnoses, a parent having a child that is just not as healthy as they had expected.
hmm
So I'm going to be working with a lot of autism, developmental delays, and then kind of sensory,
hmm
which all overlap a lot.
Yeah.
So I'll be doing, it's a lot of observation. So it kind of looks like maybe we're not doing so much when we're there and we're just watching the baby move through his or her environment. But really what we're looking at, and I have this here that I just got all ready, but we have milestones. So here, for example, we have all the motor, sensory, communication, and sorry, you can't really see it, but it has all the milestone checklists for
Mhm.
all the way up to 3-year-olds every month. So
hmm
that's a lot of the stuff that we're observing is whether or not they've met some of their milestones. So
Yeah.
while lying on tummy, will they lift and hold their head up? And then
Right.
communication with kiddos, it's making eye contact and cooing and smiling and having those new perspectives where they look at a toy and then look at mom, and that's kind of their way of communicating that they want that toy. So a lot of it is very observation based, but
Yeah.
a lot of wheels turning while we're doing
Yeah.
that.
And it's
Yeah.
subtle from the outside, but these are important, not because we want to I know for new moms and dads, they can get overly worried about milestones and like, oh, are they doing this or that? But there are things that an expert can find that can be an indication of something. And if you find these things earlier, so much the better. Like that you can start the interventions, you can be aware. And it's not about, oh, this kid's broken. It's about, okay, this is a place where this child is going to need some extra help, or where this child might have more trouble fitting in to the systems, and how can we support them in that so that they're going to not suffer as much as they go through the systems that maybe aren't set up for them. So finding those interventions, and the earlier you start, the better, because they're going to have less trauma. My kid has school trauma. He will tell you that over and over. He wasn't diagnosed until 4th grade. Well, a lot of trauma happened before that, and plenty of trauma happened after that in certain schools too, that could have been possibly avoided. I mean, our traumas do often lead us to our growth, but wouldn't we love to have less trauma for our kids growing up?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's level up. That's amazing. That's such good work. That's such good work, Alyssa. I love that you're doing that.
Thank you.
I'm happy for those kids in San Diego who are gonna have this opportunity to be observed by you, to maybe learn some things, and the families, the parents, also your clients, who are gonna get to learn about some things about their kids and ways that they can show up for them. That's what warrior parents do. That's what we always want to do.
I have one really interesting story to share as well.
I love that.
I was at a preschool, and I was doing an assessment for a little kiddo, and one of my professors had mentioned to me that he had low tone, so just lower muscle tone, kind of a little guy, just wasn't growing as fast as maybe some other kids. And she explained to me just how low tone can impact his entire future, and it blew my mind, because she said his feet aren't touching the ground right now. So if all you did was get him something so that his feet could be flat on the ground and he can be supported, then he wouldn't be working so hard to write his name, and then he wouldn't be fatiguing so early, and then he wouldn't be doing bad in school, and then he wouldn't be failing classes, and then he wouldn't be written off for the rest of his school career,
Exactly. Oh, it's all so related.
So connected. And that's just what is like so amazing about the perspective that we have, that holistic perspective, because you're not going to find that out unless you.
And it's so simple as getting him something under his chair to support his feet could have all of these positive effects on his life for the rest of his life.
Right.
These
just
small
setting him up
things
for
at the beginning.
success.
It's like when you think about when you start a journey, and just a small little change can make all the difference where you end up. And so these are changes that are going to help bring about the most positive aspect. And that's why it's important early.
Absolutely. Early detection, better outcomes.
You had something profound that you told us a little before we started. Can you repeat what that was?
Oh, yes. It was what sets occupational therapy apart from a lot of the other healthcare professions is that we ask what matters to you instead of what is the matter with you.
Yay. Yes, we're clicking and clapping. Yes, mic drop.
Nothing's the matter with you.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
wow. Yeah. Man,
well
Alyssa,
done, you.
I think you're gonna have to come back.
I would love
Oh my gosh, yeah, we want to hear about how this goes and the good
Can I share just one section of that that book my professors did?
Oh yes,
yes, we want to know about the book. Yes.
I found one that it's an example. This textbook that my professors published is great because it gives very specific groups you can do. And it's a little hard with OT doing groups because it's a little bit abstract. You have to really tie it to occupation because we aren't trained to close people back up after we open their emotions up like psychotherapists. So we have to be really mindful in the language we use. 3 of my professors, Dr. Egan, Dr. Sears, and Dr. Keener, they just published a book for occupational therapy groups addressing mental health challenges in school-based populations. It's a tier 2 resource. I mentioned those tiers earlier. So it kind of goes through all different sorts of groups you could do in school-based settings. And a lot of them like craft-based. So it'll be like you have to balance something with materials, and then that's going to be some sort of analogy to how you balance your life and
Oh,
things like that. So it
love
has
that.
to have an analogy to an occupation that you're doing. So I did one with a group, and I did a little golf putt, and it was overcoming obstacles. And we had to identify the obstacles and then create ways to overcome obstacles. So it has to be something that is very easily kind of linked to the goal and
Mhm,
occupation,
mhm.
which can feel a little abstract. So this book is really great, and it has 33 different occupational therapy groups in the school-based setting that
Wow.
That's
practitioners
Wow.
can go
that's
in.
really helpful for teachers, for maybe even people running programs, or even parents who want to do some of this good work. And what did you say the title of the book was?
It's occupational therapy groups for addressing mental health challenges in school-aged populations, a tier 2 resource. And I can
Wow.
put that in the chat real quick.
That's a
Yeah,
mouthful.
we will share a link for that in our show notes so that people who are interested can check that out.
Oh my goodness. I'm afraid we're out of time, but as you all know, we're going to have Alyssa back. Alyssa,
Yeah.
by the way, I forgot to mention when we first started all this, we had live workshops, and
Mhm.
this was in 2017, 2018.
Yeah.
And Alyssa was in one of our very first workshops. So she's been here from the beginning. Marci and I helped to put a movie together called Never Alone. Alyssa was part of that, and we interviewed her as a part of that movie. Anyway, she's been around and she's going to stay around. Sounds like she's going to be on our board. So you're going to be hearing a lot more from Alyssa.
Yay.
But Alyssa, thank you so much. I love you. And
Love
I'm
you so
super,
much.
super
Keep
excited we
doing
could do
that
this.
great work, Alyssa.
Yeah.
San
Thank you,
Diego, here
guys.
she comes.
Yep, and I still have my tapping book.
Oh,
Excellent. Another resource.
atta girl.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Sorry if I was blabbering on at all, but yeah, I would love to come on again. If there's anything I can do for you guys at all, let me know.
All right.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Thank you.
Welcome. Love you guys.
Love
Love you
you.
too, hon. Take care. Check
You
back
too.
in.
And now for your core mental health break. This is your opportunity to take a moment to support your mental wellness, your peace of mind, your own ease and grace. Take some time every day to support your mental health. You deserve it, and it matters. Today we're going to have a journaling prompt. So I encourage you to get out a journal or a piece of paper or use your phone and write the following prompt. Today, if I could do whatever I wanted to do, I would. And then just let yourself write. And remember, you're not limiting yourself by money or time or location. Today, if I could do anything I wanted to do, I would. Enjoy. Thanks for listening to the Warrior Parent Podcast, which is a production of our nonprofit, Cour Experience, who also creates and distributes Cour tools. You can find us at courexperience.org. Make sure you join us next week for another informative conversation to help you and your family show up mindfully, purposefully, and joyfully with each other and in your community.
Our Cour Tools platform consists of a number of proven tools and techniques that are designed to reduce stress, anxiety, and overwhelm in spite of what's going on in your world. We want to thank Samuel Hale, LLC, for sponsoring this podcast. Technical and marketing support comes from Inspire Your Brand. Our podcast editor is Justin Veeden. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts, the producers, or the financial supporters. I'm Debbie DiManno.
And I'm Marci Mitchell. Thanks for listening. If you resonate with the idea of creating a community to help support kids and families, won't you join us by following the podcast and sharing this episode? You can even write a review. It truly does take a village, and we appreciate you.